answer to 1984 is 1776. The answer is Americans of all race, colors, and creeds who bleed red blood and love God, coming together with D.C. police estimating more than 1 million people on the ground for the Million MAGA March. We have the exclusive footage that no one else seemed to have put out. We'll explain how we got this incredible footage. The documents the million that the police believe were there. Now the MSM's trying to block it. But first, here's the beginning of the kickoff of the march yesterday at high noon in Washington, D.C., right beside the White House. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching on TV, you see what the police estimated was 200,000 at 11 a.m. yesterday morning. But people kept arriving for hours after hours. When we got back at 3:30, where the march had started, there were still people arriving, filling the streets. And we ended up running back up down the road with time lapse and getting 2.5 miles of the streets completely packed. We showed it to police officers that are high up in the D.C. force, and they said, yes, our estimate is this was bigger than Louis Farrakhan's Million Man March, because these senior officers were there when that happened in the early 1990s, and they saw the similar thing happen when they did march down to the White House that time from several miles away. So this is all unfolding. This is all unfolding. And we've got a bunch of this exclusive footage that has not been seen. We put a bunch out last night, but then we had to go through just hours of tape we had from the march. And people had to sleep too. So right now it's almost done. I'd say we'll have it by the bottom of the hour. Exclusive footage from one camera person at the end of the march where there were estimated 500,000 people by the police. And then 3 miles back at the White House where it started at Freedom Plaza, the streets completely filled, people marching. That's how crazy this was. Because I marched when people began marching, got there, gave the first speech, stayed about an hour, turned around, got out of the big crowds, and I was like 500 yards away, crossing over by the Capitol, and people would see me and come over, and I had about 500 people following me. And then we went back all the way to the beginning to Freedom Plaza, and there were the end of it right as we got there, the streets totally full. I mean, 1 million conservatively, ladies and gentlemen. And there were news helicopters flying around. You're not allowed to fly drones in D.C. There were news helicopters flying around, and I've been checking for hours last night and today. None of it. None of it. And mainstream media won't show you the aerial shots when it was beginning with the 200,000 it was estimated, or more. And then we've got all the footage of Antifa. They attacked our hotel last night. They threw fireworks into it. I heard the explosions going off. They were beating people in front of it. And then when the crowds got mad and went and kicked their ass, it's all on video. It's all on Infowars.com. The police would run up and protect Antifa, and Antifa would run behind the police. The police in D.C. are run by demons. You want to know about a police state? This is it. Of course, it's the left running a police force, like Venezuela. They would march them out, and then they would march the Trump supporters after the big rally into Black Lives Matter Plaza so they could be attacked, just like they did in Charlottesville, where the police and the state police marched the people that were pro-memorial into the Antifa so they could be ganged up on. Truly cowardly, truly Soviet, truly evil. But it's all coming up today. Lockdown 2, huge Great Reset news. Biggest news on the eugenics world government takeover ever. They've openly announced that COVID is just meant to depopulate the planet. Stay with us. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Sunday, November 15th. The year is 2020. I'm your host, Alex Jones, and as predicted, the election didn't end on Election Day on November 3rd. The 79 days of hell kicked off. And we are now 66 days out from their attempt to falsely inaugurate Joe Biden. Massive, complete evidence of election fraud is coming out at every level. So they've got Democrat operatives in Georgia and in Michigan and in Pennsylvania desperately trying to block it. Giuliani says within days they have the proof of total election fraud systematically by the Democrats controlling it, and they're going to be releasing that info. He cannot at this time because they are lining up a few more of the extra witnesses they've got to protect. And I've got sources in the White House. I know who's run these operations. I can already look at all this news and tell you who's behind it. Hillary Clinton's former top strategist was in Georgia and got the governor, whose chief of staff works for Dominion and the Democrats, to say that they could have mail-in ballots after the date of the election. That violates federal and state law. Same thing happened in Michigan. Same thing happened. A judge just ruled in California that they illegally did that as well. This is all illegal. The 80 million ballots were illegal. And so that's coming out. That's disqualifying it right there. But see, they said, we're going to contest this. We think Trump's going to look like he's going to win, but then we'll have the extra ballots after. Well, they just froze it that night in those battleground states, gave them the votes they needed. I have that big stack of news we're going to be covering first. We're going to play the Giuliani clip. But the thing you need to understand is this. Something happened in the last 24 hours that's really big. And I'm going to tell you about it when we start the next hour. I'm going to cover the election fraud. I'm going to cover the million pro-Trump march that I was at yesterday that was at least 1 million people, the police are now saying. And then we're going to get into how the media is trying to counter that, how they're promoting violence, how they're promoting even more censorship now on people's private instant messengers, and just what the globalists are going to do if they're able to unseat Trump through fraud, and how we need to counter it. You will get next month's news, next year's news today here. But let me be crystal clear. Justin Trudeau, the leader of Canada, came out and said yesterday, and I'm going to play the clip, that COVID-19 is going to bring in world government and Agenda 2030, and that it's going to, quote, save the planet and save the earth. And if you read Agenda 2030 from the UN, it means to end industrial civilization. So when they say end poverty and end the poor, it means killing them. And so it isn't COVID-19 that kills the people. It's the lockdown and the global chain reaction of the supply chain, which has already killed millions. This is serious Nuremberg-type crimes against humanity, but it's being done through process. Like if you had the power company just turn off the power and close all the grocery stores, people would starve to death, most of them, because folks are dependent. This is just really sick, nasty elites creating a dystopia while consolidating power and control while they do it. And it is a remarkable clip, and it ties into all the environmental groups just celebrating, saying, oh, plague comforts. Nature is healing. We are the virus. Mother Jones. New York Times. COVID has a silver lining, lowering our carbon, teaching us not to consume so much. But the very people that tell us not to consume so much fly around on private jumbo jets and private helicopters and live in palaces and are worth tens of billions of dollars, and they don't want us on their land. They want us dead. And they want a post-industrial medical tyranny with forced inoculations. That's organized violence against you and your family. And I told you this 8 months ago. Fauci made it official. Got the articles right here. The lockdown never ends. You will never stop wearing masks. You will never stop social distancing. You will all be tested weekly and daily, depending on where you are, when you go to an airport or to your job. It'll all be fake testing because they turn up the test rating, the medical doctors explained, where if you ever had a viral infection, basically, it'll say you have COVID. And this is how they make you a criminal, and it's how they arrest whoever they want with a technocracy by somebody saying, oh, Alex Jones has got COVID. He's got to be taken away to a facility. And then they put a tube down your throat on a ventilator and intubate you. So remember, the new weapon of execution in the revolution is not a guillotine, because people can see a guillotine or a noose or a firing squad and fight back. It's doctors and social workers and liberals that love you. And they've already killed 60 million babies, and now they kill the old people, and now they're going to euthanize you. And Ezekiel Emanuel heads up the new task force for President fraudulently elected Biden. And they say people should just be killed at 75. And Peter Singer says kill kids up to age 3. And Fauci came out and told CNBC, Fauci says U.S. has independent spirit, but now is the time to do what you're told. These people need to be going to prison. They need to be seen as the globalist enemies that created the virus at the lab in Wuhan with Bill Gates. They need to be dealt with by the criminal justice system. But because it won't, you have a big corporate global government and big pharma and the blue cities, the blue states, the liberal, communist and socialist and labor parties of the world are all unified. They know the world's against their communism, against their socialism, with corporate fascists tax exempt on top of it. And so all of Hollywood, all the big banks, all the big systems, all the king's horses, all the king's men, they're coming and enforcing all these things we don't want. The end of our families, the 5G, the GMO, the open borders, the end of our cultures, the world government, and they all say in Operation Lockstep from the Rockefellers and Event 201 from Bill Gates and the UN 2 years ago with their Disease X simulation, that a global virus is coming, we're going to have to lock down, and civilization will never be the same because of the virus. But to control it, they release a virus that has incredible gain of function, will spread to everyone, and your body doesn't even create antibodies to it in most cases, so you're never even able to say you're immune because your body doesn't even recognize it as a threat. Because if you don't have vitamin and mineral deficiencies, you can't get sick and can't die from it. And so all the real scientists say herd immunity, it's overblown, this is all a fraud, you just need to take care of yourself and have good nutrition. And when those heads of universities and heads of hospitals go public all over Europe, all over the US, all over Asia, they get reprimanded, they get fired, they get censored, they get banned. And then Fauci goes, trust the science, when he's the one that ran the Wuhan lab with the communist Chinese. And when they knew Trump couldn't be stopped, they decided to release it. China did the Kabuki theater of how to lock down and how to be the answer to the world with its police state. And now, oh, they're good, they're open for business, but we're never going to be open again. We can't ever. Oh, there's no more Christmas. There's no more Thanksgiving. We're all scared. We all wear our little diapers over our faces. And it goes on and on. It doesn't matter. It's like, oh, the infection rate, it means you're positive, is skyrocketing. Because if you follow the graphs of increased testing and increased people being positive, it's the exact same graph. So as they put out the false test, and as all this happens, and as you don't die, it doesn't matter, they will still keep you locked down because the public's so ignorant. And once they've got everyone being tested, and once they're counting all deaths as COVID deaths, they'll finally have some numbers of COVID deaths. Now, there's still good medical doctors and good hospitals, so they stopped putting on people that died of car wrecks and gunshot wounds and cancer and pneumonia, COVID-19, to get the money. But a lot of hospitals want the money, so they engage in fraud. $53,000 plus if you say somebody died in your hospital of COVID. So it's all baked in. The fraud's baked in, and it only gets worse the more you comply. It never ends till you start saying no. And it's going to bankrupt every local business who's complying with this garbage.